Okay, so this is billed as a panel, but it's not a panel. I fooled them. Uh, what I want to do is fundamentally, I want to shut up, which will be difficult, I know. And I want to see if we can just have a conversation, right? So I don't want to sit here and ask questions and what is your favorite Pokemon. I instead, whenever I meet these guys, we just end up talking about stuff, you know? And it's sometimes tech, sometimes not. And it's always interesting, and it's always fun, and it's always sad when it ends. So I would really like to just try and get that spirit across. These two people changed my life in different ways. And I am eternally grateful to both of them. But on top of that, they are both just really nice people. I don't know if you've noticed that or not, which is really stunning. That, you know, the two of them have both got communities which reflect them. So, as I say, I'm going to maybe kick this off with just a question, and hopefully we can start a conversation going about it. Could we put that slide up? Thank you. If you would like to suggest a question, take a picture of the QR code or whatever. That'll take you to a Google form, and if everything's working, I should be able to see questions come through. I won't be able to get to everybody unless only one person asks, but we'll see what happens. Are we good?
Yeah.
Excellent. So I got a question, or this is the kind of conversation we normally have after, very late at night. I got a theory, and it's that objects are, well, the idea of object orientation as a self-contained way of doing coding is dying, and that objects are going to move from being a primary to being a secondary characteristic of coding style. And the reason I say that is I'm seeing more and more of the coding that I do as being transformations as opposed to managing state. And so when I'm writing Ruby code, for example, I would say probably 90% of my code now goes into modules and not into classes. And then the classes are there when I need them, but then they call out to just straight functions that do transformation work for me. Funny story there is I posted using extend self in a module to turn all the methods into method. And I got people telling me, that's not what you're supposed to do. But I think personally there's a lot to that. And I was wondering if you guys had any thoughts on that area.
Well, it's the definition of the object-oriented programming is changed in the history. So the original object-oriented programming, claimed by the Alan Kay, is basically the object sending message each other, no more, no less. And but the Strauss-Schwab's object orientation which is the object is kind of the structure, and it has state, and it can be written, and we can select the appropriate method according to the class of the object or something like that. And Ruby partially reflect that part of that. And then nowadays, the people leaving from the concept of inheritance, or, for example, the gold or last do not have the concept of the inheritance, but at the same time, it also have the ability to import some kind of the module, like traits or the object composition to the entity or object. So I think your idea, like the data structure through the pipeline or something between the function can be included in the broader sense of the object orientation. Some years ago, I thought about what is the crucial concept of object orientation, because we often say inheritance, encapsulation, and dynamic binding as the key components of the object-oriented programming, but we see a lot of the object-oriented programming language, and there are several object-oriented programming language lacks either of the concepts. So that, for example, like a Rust and Go is a kind of object-oriented programming, but it doesn't come with the inheritance. And the commonless object system lacks the encapsulation. And for example, the C does not have the dynamic binding by default, but you can write some kind of the object-oriented programming in C as well. So that means that those three concepts is not crucial at all. So then I got the conclusion that for object-oriented programming, we have there are two very important things, and then one is the identity. The identity of the object. This object is the object things. Okay, you may represent it by the reference. You may represent it as a pointer or something, but the identity is very important. I can distinguish this entity and that entity. The other part is that if you have the dynamic binding, which is much easier to do object-oriented, but not crucial. So the identity is most important, and the dynamic binding is the second best, I think. So even Elixir, in the definition, even Elixir is the part of the object-oriented programming.
Yeah, I like that. I like what you said a lot. And when Dave was asking the question, I was thinking that what we have seen or I have seen in the last decade is that it's exactly like when we talked about objects, it was meant to be this bundle of features, right? Like polymorphism, inheritance, right? And what we see is that the programming languages they get some of those features, right? For quite some time, people believe that, if you don't have objects, you don't have polymorphism, right? But then you mentioned Go that has interfaces, Rust has traits. So I think we have been over time looking at what we would generally think it's objects, or like the C++ definition of objects or Java, looking at those features and say, I want this and this and this, and making them part of the language. But I like a lot when you said that a definition of object is identity. Yeah.
But then what about this? If you look at people actually doing it in practice, they are using classes and objects simply as a way of writing the code as opposed to a pattern of actually using objects. So we have situations like in Rails, the controllers. Well, controller is stateless, right? It takes a request, gets a response, it's a transformation. But no, it's a class, right? We have service objects, which is the most ridiculous concept ever invented, right? Oh, wow, there's people out there. But I mean, why would I want to create an object just so I could call a function on it if it's stateless, right? But those kind of ideas worry me because it's kind of like a corruption of what we're supposed to be doing with objects. And I don't know, I'm just trying to struggle to find how we can actually help people use objects appropriately, but then don't use objects when it's not appropriate.
Well, I don't know, but at the same time, the even purely purely functional programming language requires some kind of the side effect and the state changes, like the Haskell use monad to represent the side effect, and then or IO to represent the states. And then for me, so denying side effect as a whole is not a good idea, because we have side effect. We require side effect to have for application. That no one wants the web application that does not have side effect. So you cannot buy anything. You cannot make a reservation in the airport, airline company or anything like that. We need side effect. We need state, and so that denying that is the kind of the contradiction, or the avoiding the real world. So that so in my opinion, so that the controlling and reducing side effects, or making some functions or the methods the purely functional is a good idea, but it is not to be forced. It should be disciplined.
Yeah, I think this is where we are going to like differ in philosophy, because because for me it's a question of default. What is your default? Is it mutable? We can talk about all kinds of side effects, but I think the most common we face as developers is the mutable state. If it should be mutable or immutable by default. And then I think, and then depending on what you choose, different conventions and different practices are going to be born, and some things they're going to feel simpler, some things are going to feel more awkward, and you have to build on top of that, on that choice and that decision.
So if you look at it from the Elixir point of view, right, then you are far more concerned with the flow of data than the maintenance of state. Would that be fair to say?
I think so. I think that's a good summary.
So has that changed your view then of the idea of stateful objects as being useful or not?
So, to me, like my interpretation today of how I see an object today, like in Ruby or JavaScript, is that it's really the bundling of three things. It's the bundling that we know of, like the state. It's the bundling of behavior. And it's the bundling of something that I was calling time, but Matt just came with a much better definition, which is the identity, right? You are coupling those three things together, right? And that's what you get with an object. And for me, what I try to understand is, well, how can you decouple those three things?
Right.
So when you're building software, if I don't need identity, I can have just those two things, which I believe are like data class maybe in Ruby. Yeah. So it's more like, well, instead of giving you like something that has everything by default, I give you the pieces, and you can put those pieces together and manage that. And so if you need the state, you can opt into that state, and because the default things are decoupled, you're only going to bring state when you need it, right?
Right. So does immutability play into this as well?
Immutability, yeah, immutability is useful for most cases, many cases. Like data class is immutable values, and you can freeze at a hash and strings and arrays to avoid the mutation. So that I agree with the controlling the modification. But at the same times, in some cases, like we want to modify the existing value to say reduce the allocation or maybe the improve the performance, or avoid the copying of the object or something like that. I mean, as a language, I defer. I know that kind of decision up to users. So that Ruby not going to force users for prohibit mutation or encourage mutation. We are just neutral about mutability.
Yeah, and I think like I think identity is related to mutation, because why you need identity is because something may change over time. So you need to establish what is the identity of that thing, because like we have identities because we do change over time, right? And when you have a data class, the identity of the data class is the data class itself because it doesn't change. So if something doesn't change, it identifies by itself. But if something can change, you
so
need...
in the pure functional programming language, so that there's no identity because of you cannot distinguish in any way of the say list of the 0, 1, no matter where it's allocated, no matter where it started. Their values, just values. There's no way to distinguish them. So that in that sense, the pure functional programming language has no identity, and thus they are not the object-oriented programming language.
Although the interesting side effect of not having identity is you get time travel for free.
Yes.
But anyway, so I'm going to ask, so I had a boatload of questions asked, and a whole bunch of people clearly want to see a fist fight take place. So I only had 5 people so far ask, what is your favorite Pokemon? You people. A lot of people want to know if you could change one thing about your language, what would it be? And then one person came up with a different way of expressing it, which actually is kind of interesting. Mats, if there was one thing you could change about Elixir, what would it be? And Jose, if there was one thing you could change about Ruby, what would it be?
Yeah, I'm not familiar with the detail of the Elixir, but when I see the Elixir programs, I kind of slightly bothered with the repeated enum dot things.
Yeah.
So that if we can make those kind of things by, fix the scope and just the pipeline, map pipeline list reduce or something, it would be better.
Yeah, no, you can import a module, but like so that's one of the funny things, right? Because so importing, like me coming from Ruby, I was like, I want to import a module, so I'm not typing things all the time. But then like you put the thing out there and then people use it, and then like the best practices emerge, and for the community, the best practice is to not import it. So there are like a couple things that, like over time, like the community, as it grew, got some like consensus, like, okay, we're not doing things this way.
Yeah.
We are doing things this other way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In Ruby, the variable itself represents the namespace because of the method. But in Elixir, it's just value, so that there's no namespace attached to the value, so that you have to say the enum in it. But I don't know, by using the importing, not a good idea, but say probably multiple dispatch or something like that. I don't know, but if I could drop these enums on the module. Denote module specification, it will be much shorter and clearer, I think. One thing.
I can't come up with something right now.
Oh,
I want to
no.
say, I would make everything immutable by default, but that's not possible.
Yeah, as a object-oriented programming language, and it's quite hard to make them immutable. But it's like a lens, so that every change must return the new value with keeping the old value unchanged or something like that.
Yeah, like the first prototype I did for Elixir was it was actually object oriented, and it had like a prototype based class model,
Uh-huh.
and it was exactly that. Like now all the time you have to be building a new object because, right? And it felt awkward, and I was like, oh, this doesn't really work. I'm going to hijack a question right here. Is there anything that you would like to remove? Because people say a
Remove
lot of,
from Ruby.
yeah, but you cannot
Yeah,
because
yeah.
like yeah,
Because compatibility issue or something.
yes.
I'd like to remove the Perl origin magic variables like $/$ things.
Okay.
That's a kind of ancient things. And then the second one is that I'd like to remove threads from the language. And then because the Ruby thread is half baked. The Raptor is much better. So in that sense, I'd like to remove threads and use something similar to Raptor. Then the third thing is probably outload. Yeah, outload. Yeah, and outload has the unexpected side effect of by the requiring anytime access to the constants. Zeitberg and the others, especially Rails, use the outload that much, so that I cannot remove that. But I regret adding outload to the language.
Okay, so turnabout is fair play. What would you remove?
I mean, there are definitely things.
Alex
but-
is perfect.
I know it is.
Like if you go to the documentation, we have like the sidebar with all the modules, and then if you scroll down, we have a section deprecations with everything that we've deprecated over time, and it's a big list of the mistakes that are historically archived.
But you fixed them. Most of them.
Allegedly, because I fixed something that was wrong, but I don't know if I introduced something that is right. Right? So like only time will tell,
Yeah. Yeah. 30 years of history is kind of burden.
Yeah.
Ruby 4, you start again.
No, not that idea. Never again. Never again. The restart is a bad idea.
So you actually mentioned something interesting in passing, and that is, over time, the community kind of comes up with a way of doing something. How often have you found, each of you, the community doing things in a way that either surprised you and you liked, or you didn't like, but it's what they chose?
Well, the first surprise I had was one day I got the email, the huge patch attached, and with this patch, the Ruby will be multilingualized. So it used to be support the Japanese encoding only because I'm Japanese, but he sent me a patch to dynamically switch the encoding of the language handles, and I didn't have that kind of idea, and I was surprised. And I applied the patch and tested, and it worked. And then that leads to my idea of the code set character set independent implementation of the Ruby 2, so that the email from nobody lead me to the big concept in the newer version of the Ruby language. That was my first surprise of the community effort.
Yeah, I think like the one that I struggled the most with was with the code formatter.
Yeah.
So who here uses a code formatter? Right? And who here like do not like the idea at all of a code formatter?
Oh, there's one, no, there's two, three. Okay, would everybody else please take these people and throw them out of the room?
Yeah, so at some point, like when the community was growing and we were starting to have like bigger teams, they started like publishing style guides, and people would come to me like,
Go ahead.
why are you writing? Is it me?
Not me, I guess.
It's common, it's definitely her.
Earth?
Hello?
Carry on.
Yeah, and then the community was like, we want a style guide, we want an official style guide. And then I was like, no, I don't want to have an official style guide. It's like figure out what is going to be the best. But then I started feeling those pains myself as I was going through projects. The Elixir team was growing, and then they're like, we want to write code in the same way as the Elixir code base. And then, so it took me, and then everybody was saying, well, we need a code formatter. It's going to be important for the adoption and so on. And I was like, fine, right? Let me do it. And so we got together. The Elixir team implemented the formatter, and it's part of the language. But it was really hard for me to, when I was working on it, like, is this going to be a good idea or not? So I wanted to try it. I was like really hard to convince, but this is something that today it's like I can't live without. Because I think like the code, so it was like a lesson for me. Because to me, like the code formatter, it basically gives you a freedom, because today, like if you don't have a code formatter, what you do is that you're writing the code, right? And then you are formatting it. At the same time, you go and you add parentheses, you add your style. So you're thinking about this all the time. So now when I write code, I just write the most horrible code. I don't care about indentation, about spaces. I just, mash the keyboard, and then I press a key, and it's like, oh, it's good. And it was a lesson. I was like, yeah.
I would point out, though, that if you're the person that wrote the formatter, then it's probably formatting it the way you wanted it formatted.
So that's the thing. Like, it's not my style, because there are a couple things like that I realized is that a lot of my style was like, I'm feeling the weather, It's like I did not have a rule. So if I try to codify that, it would not work out. It would not be good, or it would be like a bunch of exceptions. So that was it as well. It's like at some point I'll be like, look, here's how I was used to write the code before, and now it doesn't. Like that style does not scale, let's say. We cannot generalize it.
Right.
And then we had to discuss and think about it. So I had to let go of what I thought was my favorite way of writing Elixir code.
But I mean, this is kind of like, in a way, it's kind of an easy topic to talk about because everybody has an opinion about code formatters. But I remember that, I think it was Elixir. I mean, it's like way back when. At one point, the Elixir formatter used to remove trailing commas from lists.
It still does.
It does?
Yeah.
Still?
Yeah. Should I go with the people?
Yeah, if you don't mind.
With those four?
Yeah,
all right.
Yeah. But that kind of thing, to my mind, goes beyond formatting. Because that's more than format. That's talking about almost, it's not quite a design issue, but it's somewhere between formatting and design. Because by doing that, it makes it harder to refactor my code.
Yeah, so the reason why we don't support trailing commas is because like the formatter is meant to be general, and because we have optional parentheses, you cannot have trailing commas with optional parentheses.
On function calls, but in lists and everything else you can.
Yeah, but then you start having to specialize how you behave in different places, and I went for like more a general approach.
Right.
The good news is that part of the community, they created something called the freedom formatter, where they can make all the decisions that they want, and then there's a flag there.
My kind of people. Excellent, excellent. All right.
I have a question for Jose. And at the beginning, no one knows Elixir, of course. It's the start. And for me, the Dave Thomas wrote the book, The Programming Ruby, and it is the start for Ruby. How about you and Elixir? To how did they soar?
Yeah, we did. We do share the Dave Thomas history together.
You can both
Yeah, with the Programming Elixir book. But one of the things that, from my time in Rails, I think uh, one of the biggest lessons was like, if you create something and you want other people to use it, you have to go out and talk about. So in the first years, it was going to a lot of conferences, like not a specific training programming language. I would go to Ruby conferences, as we we saw yesterday, and talk about it. And I think it actually, after it started gaining, because there's the other thing that I like to say a lot, like Elixir is running on top of their Erlang virtual machine. So like all of the hard work, like, Ruby got a JIT. You have to work for that JIT, right? Erlang got
Because it's
a
fun.
JIT. I could stay on the beach, and Elixir got a JIT anyway. So I think that was able to speed up a lot of the Elixir adoption process, especially because Erlang has always had this kind of like, magical feeling in the industry of like, oh, it's such a great technology that felt distant, and we could make it more. And yeah, so I think like Dave Thomas got involved, and then not like soon after we started having the first Elixir conference as well, and things happened like very fast at that initial moment.
Yeah, you took off very, very quickly. Ruby was a bit slower.
Yeah, a bit so.
Yeah, I mean, Ruby is kind of interesting because I can look at book sales, and I don't know if that's a proxy for users or not. But Ruby was very much linear in the early 2000s. And it grew, and there were like two curves. There's two linear portions. It's like a slow one at the beginning, and then it ramps up and it gets going. And then Rails comes along, and it goes vertical, yeah? But with you, it was actually noticeable. I mean, I didn't catch the very beginning of it, but you had a ramp up like that from the beginning. And I don't know if that's because of better communication on the internet or whatever it might be. But yeah, you had a pretty strong, you came out of the gate fast on
Yeah.
that. So, one question people have asked is, what is the most difficult non-technical area
Non-technical.
of being a language? I don't know what the word would be, creator or guardian or whatever.
Yeah. The Ruby was released in the public in 1995. So I started developing Ruby in 1993. Those 2 years, almost 3 years, I work alone. I work on Ruby alone. And if I stop the developing Ruby, then no one has bothered. So no one cares. So that the implementing programming language is pretty much fun, but at the same time, it's very complex, and sometimes got tired. But, I felt several times that okay, it's kind of tough. So that what if I could stop my personal project, hobby project, and yeah, that is the probably the biggest non-technical issue for Ruby.
But then does it become more stressful, the fact that now it's public? You really can't.
After releasing to the public, the people react. So that people may send me say the proposals and the bug reports and something, and that would rather motivate me. So that after releasing to the public, I didn't have any such issues any longer.
For me, it's probably going to go a bit more on the personal level in the sense that sometimes I struggle a lot with the expectations that people that are external they put on me, and having to deal and manage that expectation. Sometimes it's quite hard, and
Do you mean in terms of people demanding things from you? Or?
for example, similar, or even like it goes into all kinds of expectations that people can place, into how, how to lead the project, how I communicate, how I, if I am watching a talk at an event or if I'm on the hallway track, like, so there is this constant, not constant, well, it is constant, like expectation of how that person should behave because, and I understand it's kind of natural because like, probably the way we interact, people build this idea, but sometimes it's very hard, right? And I would rather focus more on on the community itself, and on shared responsibilities, right? So a lot there is like expectation of like, oh, if there is a problem in the community, I should be the one tackling it. And I don't think that's how a community is supposed to work, right? It should be a shared responsibility. I understand that I have a big role, right? And what I say is influential. I know that that's the other side of the coin. And that's exactly the balance, like balancing those things, that it's hard.
Do you find, so I got this thing, whereas I'm not naturally like an outgoing person. And I find that when I come back from conferences, my wife has learned not to talk to me in the car coming back from the airport because I'm all kind of talked out, Yeah. Do you find the same?
Yeah, I don't know who said it, but they said like there are, like two kinds of persons. The one that when they go out with people, they come back recharged, like
Right,
full
right,
of
right.
energy.
Yeah.
And the ones that, when you go out, it's like, oh, I'm drained, right?
Right.
My social battery is gone, and I'm definitely on my social battery is gone. It's like, you know.
Yeah.
I don't know, but my wife often says that after the conference or the events, and I talk, I often talk more. So that probably I was energized by the meeting people with the community.
Very nice.
The question that's come up 2 or 3 times is to do with software complexity and basically how the world just seems to be getting exponentially more complex as we go forward. And I guess both of you are trying to create some kind of antidote to that in a way. But do you have any thoughts on the overall direction that we're taking and the complexities that we're creating?
The software become very complex very easily, and because of the request from the society or the users are very complex, so that yeah, it is wonderful when we can separate and untangle those complexity into the combination of the simple concepts. That is wonderful, and that is nice. But unfortunately for mere humans, so that it is very difficult to make that kind of the entanglement of the complexity. So that as a result, our application tends to be very, very complex very easily. Then the Ruby tries to make it a little bit simpler by reducing the amount of code they write. Then, but the for complete solutions, we have to untangle the complexity and draw the architecture to support those kind of the combination of the simple things.
Do you think the complexity then is outside the software community and we're just responding?
Yeah.
Or do you think we're creating that complexity?
It's the reflection of the outside world of complexity in the outside world. I believe.
But wouldn't some of that complexity come from the tools that we've given people to make life more complex?
If so, it's the fault of that tools or language.
Okay.
So that every language should be designed to reduce the complexity in mind.
Yeah, I'm not sure where my thoughts are going to go on this, but I feel like I like to say, like, for example, take web development. My first website was I did for my band in university, and it was a Flash, which is dead, right? It was a Flash application that I put on HTML and I hosted it somewhere, right? And then I've been involved sometimes on and off with web development, but in like the last 15 years, there is so much. I'm not sure if complexity is the best word, but I'm going to use that word because before, even if you're using like PHP, right, you would just write something, put it on a page. And today, like, you have to learn Git, you have to do HTML, you have to do CSS, you have to do maybe JavaScript, you have to do the server-side programming language. And there is so much I did not cover everything. So that thing that before was like simple, right, but probably could not support the complexity of the world, right, now is quite more complex. And maybe it better supports some of the complexities of the world. But so I think like we do have complexity. We do have complexity that we get from our tools, and I think it's worth asking. Like, and I think a lot of it what I would be careful with is when let's say you inherit some complexity because of the tools that you chose, because of your architecture, you should be able to think about it and reevaluate it. It's like, is this complexity what I actually need or not? And that's how I would try to approach the problem at this level. Like, I think we do have complexity from dependencies, from languages, because no language is perfect, right? And then I think if we can be given more time and more understanding for assessing where that complexity is, and if that's worth the cost that we're paying, then maybe we can like try to leave some of that behind.
So do you feel any not responsibility is the wrong word, any pressure as kind of like the leader of an ecosystem to try and keep that ecosystem simple?
Um, I don't. So there's a funny story. I was at an event, and the person told me like, "Oh, I work at a company that is responsible for managing all of the water subsystem, like in a state in the UK." And I was like, "Why are you telling me that?" Right? I don't need this responsibility in my life, right? Like, if I screw it up, like, hundreds of thousands of people go without water, right?
Right.
But ultimately, I think I don't put that pressure on myself because I think it's also everybody's responsibility to, we were talking about complexity and process, and I think some of those things they are warranted, like tests. Some people would say tests are complexity, right? They are not necessary, right? But it's we have this shared responsibility of working with whatever you want to do with software verification. If you want to do code reviews as you're processing the team, do that as well. So ultimately, if I screw it up, it should be everybody's responsibility to find that as well and give me feedback, and we evolve together. And that should not fall solely on my shoulders.
Absolutely. I don't think it should. And I think, interestingly, the two of you, of pretty much all the people I can think of in your similar positions, take a way more conservative view about change, and you're way less driven by, current bright shiny things. You don't chase after all the latest trends. So I think from that point of view, I think you're doing a stellar job. Like I said this morning, there is still code that's 20 years old that would run on Ruby. Typically, my Rails app won't run in the next month if I update my Rails. So, that's actually part of what I get to, is that it worries me that we don't really know what we're doing as developers, and we are playing with front-end stuff, for example, right? Where does the code run that does the rendering? Does it run on the server? Does it run on the browser? Does it run in both? Does it run over in Manchuria somewhere? I don't know, right? But nobody knows, and yet we're being told to try doing it this way, try doing it that way, and it switches every 3 weeks. And I don't know about you guys, but I just feel whiplash from that. Everything is just going back and forth and back and forth. You don't feel the pressure to try to track that, or you just carry on doing it the way you're doing it?
Because of the field we are in, because the programming language has the long history, and we have the stack knowledge of the past programming languages, and the programming language, the long-lived, relatively stable things. That's the reason the Ruby can keep compatibility for a long time. And but for example, the web field, the things change so drastically every week, and so that to adapt the surrounding situation, so the framework should be evolved very quickly. And some years ago I asked a member of the core committee of the Rail teams, and why every version you break the compatibility, and why the Ruby tried to keep the compatibility for a long time, but the Rails do not supposed to try to keep compatibility. And then the answer was the web situation has changed drastically, and if we stop adapting new things and stop changing, and probably stop breaking the compatibility, so probably we are left out from the industry, so to keep up the keep up the situation, so that you have to change fast and sometimes break the compatibility. And then that does not mean that we are right and they are wrong or and such, but the surrounding situation, surrounding industry is different.
Yeah, I agree that as I think as a language, it's we don't have that much pressure to change. Sometimes there are things like, like there are some like let's say like macro topics like oh a type system perhaps or just in time compiler or LSP, but those are more like those things they happen over long periods of time and it affords it makes our life easier, which is great. But for example, like we were just talking about complexity, and I think like the rate of change in Rails is a source of complexity that trickles down. I was like part of Rails team. I built libraries and I worked on projects. I have been like on all three steps, and you see like when you have those break changes, it trickles down to everybody, to the community. It's additional work that everybody along that chain now they have to do, which could be put elsewhere, right? But now you have to focus on that thing. So yeah, I understand that it's a way faster moving space, but I would ideally I would try to find mechanisms and ways to conciliate those two, right? Like what is the best way to evolve but preserving many of the code that is out there.
Yeah, that's a really hard balance too, because the two are contradictory in so many
Yeah.
ways. So we've been going for I don't know what, almost an hour, I guess, and it's the weekend coming up, so I don't want to hold people for too much longer. One interesting question that came through, though, and maybe we'll make this the last one, would be, what are you excited about for the future? We're not excited about.
Yeah, it's it's no surprise. I'm excited about many things. So like the things that I talked yesterday, and so I'm always trying to find, and you said this in your talks as well. I'm always trying to find new things, to discover new things, to get excited about, and think of different ways of thinking about programming and reason about it. And I think that is going to be a forever source of excitement for me, right? So exploring something in that direction is something that I am really enjoying. I know there's a lot that we have been talking about AI, and we talked about we didn't talk about, but we are aware of like the consequences of AI and how some of that can be positive, how that can be negative. I am more on the optimistic side of things. I think, yeah, we are going to do a lot of things that we're not going to like, that are going to be bad, but I am hopeful that the outcome is going to be more positive than negative. Maybe I'm being naive, you know. Yeah, and I think like even with programming languages, there is always like exciting things happening. You mentioned Unison, and I think, for example, since Rust came out, I think it kind of like, regardless if you enjoy Rust or not, it kind of like shook the foundation a little bit of how people were thinking about software security, and how to write performance software that it is maintainable, and I think like it's just the beginning of that, and we are going to continue seeing like more programming languages. Like Rust is the beginning, really, and we are going to see more programming languages trying to blurry the lines of what it is a low-level programming language and a high level at the same time, and try to, because today we pretty much consider them to be two separate things, right? You do Rust and then, or sorry, you do Ruby or Elixir, and if you want performance, you write C and Rust. And I think we'll start seeing more and more approaches that try to uh, close this gap. If it's going to be good, I don't know, but I'm excited to see what, maybe we prefer to keep them separate after all. But I think it's exciting to see what is going to happen there and how people are going to innovate on some of those old problems.
For me, the one thing is the JIT compiler, and JIT compiler itself is the old technology, like from 90s. But recently we added a JIT compiler to the Ruby. Then it first started as the kind of toy like JIT compiler, but nowadays we have the more realistic. The JIT compiler with the more realistic performance. Then they re-implemented everything in Rust, and then they support the YJIT originally support the Intel architecture only, but now they support the ARM 64 as well because of the Apple, and the most developers has the MacBook. Then even the JIT compiler developers using Mac, and if they don't support the ARM architecture, they don't get the benefit of the JIT compiler, even if they develop the JIT compiler itself. Then they support the the ARM 64, then start inlining and adding many optimizations and improve the performance. That would be very nice and things. And then the JIT compiler and the improvement of the JIT compiler itself is kind of impressive things, and it leads to the future of the Ruby language. The Python community tries to improve the performance of the C Python and in the faster C Python project, and it makes C Python performance 5 times fast in 4 years or something like that. And but most of the challenges they are trying to accomplish are already done in Ruby. There is wonderful things, yeah. After those improvement, Ruby is still not 5 times faster. So that I suspect that kind of their effort would be their result. And anyway, the performance improvement is one things that we expect for to the future. The second thing is AI, and I'm a user of AI, but recently I tried which one? The generative AI. I don't remember, but probably ChatGPT, and to write tests for my code. And yeah, I confess I hate to write tests. It's not dry. I like to write code, but I don't want to write its behavior as a test. So that if the AI generates the test from my code, that would be nice. I asked it to infer the type of the arguments and the return value, and it says correct answer of the expected types by merely reading the code. So that if I write the code, so that the AI can infer the type of the type signatures without writing any type declaration from human, and then it can also write tests. So the non-fun part of the programming can be done by the AI. I expect for the future. And then the bad things is that some people try to make AI write their code. That is bad things, because if AI write the code and you write the test and the types, you participate in the non-fun part and pass the very crucial part and the interesting part to the AI. That is wrong, I believe. So But if you if you use the AI right, you can focus on the very fun and the crucial part of the programming, and the rest you can pass the rest of the programming to the AI. Then it enhances your joy and the productivity and of the programming, I think.
You've got to be careful there, though, because if you relegate AI to writing tests, then when they take over, they're going to be mad at you. So,
Yeah.
so I got to say, okay, so I get to answer that question too, even though I asked it, because I've just been thinking about the future, and every now and then, when I start to look at the future, I get kind of like a bit distressed, right? It just looks like chaos sometimes. And I was actually thinking, this is going to sound like I'm just playing to you guys, but I'm not. Coming to a conference like this, the biggest thing I've taken out of this is just talking to everybody here. And I feel like I have probably talked to everybody here, but talking to everybody here, I feel a lot more confident about the future than I did before I got here. Because I'm dealing with a group of very smart and motivated and interesting people. So that made me feel a lot more comfortable. So thank you very much for that. So with that, I am going to let you guys go and actually have a life. I really, I mean, I got so much to thank you guys for, but just now, thank you for putting up with this and playing along. Yeah, so let me just ask you, please, to thank Mats and Jose for all they've done.
Thank you.